Councillor Robinson, you're good to go to start the meeting whenever you like. You are live on YouTube now.
We've got, thank you, Kirsty. Well, we might as well start now. No time like the present. So welcome everyone to the best scrutiny board in Calderdale. I'm George Robinson. I feel like it's a TV programme. Yeah, welcome members. It's good to see everyone here. Substitutes, do we have any subs for this meeting? Any apologies?
None received, Chair.
No, perfect. Thank you very much, Fazana. Interests, does any member have any interest about for anything on the agenda this evening?
Nothing whatsoever.
No. Very good. Okay, well, if you do have an interest, you can declare it under the item if necessary. Yeah, number 3, the public are allowed. We're on YouTube. Number 4, the minutes from the previous meeting. Does any member have any comments, criticisms, critiques about the minutes from the last meeting?
I'm happy to move them as a correct record, Chair.
Very good. Can we have a seconder, please? Yeah, was that Councillor Young?
Councillor Young, I think.
It's good to see Councillor Young here, by the way. I was very concerned that you wouldn't be at the meeting, but yeah, so proposed, seconded, all in favour? And very good, that's passed. Okay, on to item number 5. Now, we've got an absolute action-packed agenda, as you can see. It's just the way it's fallen, unfortunately, but we've got some really exciting items here this evening. The first one is housing. So what I'll do, just a bit of a preamble. If members could keep the questions as short as possible, that would be appreciated. And I'm sure cabinet members and officers will also return the favour. Regarding, first of all, starting off for this housing topic, we've all read the presentation. I thought it was a marvellous presentation. So I'll first of all ask for updates, and if there isn't any updates, that's absolutely fine. Third point is, I think probably 40 minutes per item is adequate, and I'll time that as well to make sure I remember the timings. So I think that should be sufficient. Okay, then shall I pass on to officers then, or indeed cabinet members? Is there anything to add to the report? Who's leading on this? Heidi.
It's myself, Councillor.
Hello, Heidi. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Councillor Robinson, and thank you for asking us to come along today to talk about this item. I don't think there are any specific updates, although I will ask my colleagues, Mark Dowson, who leads on Weave Homes, and George Patterson from Together Housing, to see if there are any updates from them, because I've actually been on leave for the last 2 weeks, so things may have happened in my absence, but I don't have any updates on my presentation. But just to introduce George Patterson, who's Director of Property Services at Together Housing, and Mark Dowson, who leads for Weave Homes.
Perfect, welcome. Welcome. Do you have anything to add to the report, George or Mark?
Nothing from me, Councillor.
Yeah.
Nothing from me either, Councillor.
Perfect. Well, that's marvellous then. And I should also welcome, I think it's Sheila's first meeting at the place board. So welcome, Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. And hello to all the members of the committee that I've not met yet. Delighted to be here. I am Sheila O'Neill, a new Director of Regeneration and Strategy. So I'll be here and listen to everything the team have got to say as well, and hopefully contributing at some point. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right, members, do we have any questions on this item number 5, housing? Yeah, Councillor Dickinson. I should mention, if you indicate in the chat, that would be absolutely marvellous. But Councillor Dickinson, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. First of all, I'm a little bit baffled as to what garden suburbs means. Can anyone offer a working definition? And secondly, within the auspices of the companies that the council are setting up, as I understand it from the report, what carbon reducing initiatives are being undertaken in both the design and layout of the new estates? So, for example, are we actively considering installation of, for example, solar PV and solar water into the housing fabric, roof fabric, and for example, suitable pavement trees, as I would call them, the ones that aren't going to grow too big, being planted as part of the design within the estates themselves. And what other initiatives are being integrated into the businesses as a response to the climate emergency that was declared? Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of facets there.
Yes, I'm sorry about that.
I don't know how we chop that up, to be honest. How did you want to allocate?
Yeah, if I take the first point about garden suburbs, and then I'll pass to Mark to talk about Weave Homes, if I may. So in terms of garden suburbs, I believe it was something that our previous Director of Regeneration and Strategy, Mark Thompson, started to use the term a couple of years ago. But I do know that it is a term that's used in the planning world. So it's not something that my service area have come up with, but it is a phrase that is used across the planning world and within housing. So, for example, I know that there's been a lot of work done in York around this kind of work. So that was where that term came from. Whether there is a formal definition, I would have to check with Richard Seaman on that, I think. But we can come back to you on that.
Yes, please.
Fantastic. Was there anything else to cover there? There was the sort of sustainable development point as well.
And then if I pass to Mark for Weave Homes. Yeah.
Mark, over to you, Mark.
Yeah, if I may, I'll just add to Heidi's point on the garden suburbs. I think the formal planning term is sustainable urban extensions, but probably not as catchy as garden suburbs. I think in planning terms, what they're trying to do, if there's a certain quantum of development, is that they try to ensure that the infrastructure is there rather than just building a load of houses, that they're supported by, schools, open space and things like that, to ensure that it's sustainable development rather than just a certain quantum of housing. On the second point, I think your question related more to the sort of these sustainable urban extensions or garden suburbs rather than Weave Homes as such. But Weave Homes, the council's local development company, is certainly interested in the sustainability of any developments it brings forward. Obviously, the council is represented by the shareholders committee that respond to any proposals for development that we'd put forward. So obviously the council, having already declared a climate emergency, would have a strong voice on any development proposals that the company brings forward.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'll bring in Councillor Audrey Smith, if I may.
Yeah, sorry, I'm using my laptop so I can see on my iPad what I was going to talk about. Yeah, thank you. On Weave Homes, we did, myself and Councillor Foster went up and had a look at Hollins Park, and we did sort of raise our concerns that there were a huge number of houses being planned, well, a large number of houses being planned for the space. And in terms of stacking that, you said there needed to be a sort of viable amount of housing because it needed to stack up against the cost of draining the land. As this is one of the sites that the council has sold to Weave Homes, I'm just concerned that we do really need to get on and get some housing, but I think Weave Homes is a brilliant opportunity to take the points on board that Councillor Dickinson's just raised, that these need to be sort of sustainable and sort of forward-looking developments. And I think the council has to be allocating land to Weave Homes that is going to produce sort of modern, efficient homes that we can be proud of, so that we can hopefully generate more income and possibly more affordable homes at the end of it. I don't know. I'm worried that we're packing too many homes on to Hollins Park in an effort to cover the costs of draining the site, which all seems totally back to front to me and hugely unenvironmentally sound. I do actually have another question, and I know we're really busy, but I'd really like to ask about Together Housing and the partnership. I know there's been a lot of hold-ups, and I know they're not necessarily anybody's fault, but in 2017, the plan was to build between 500 and 650 homes. How many of them are actually going to be built within that 5 years? I've added up about 300, but I wonder if you can give figures on that. And then just the use of land. A lot of houses have been taken down by Together Housing in recent years, and haven't seen very many going up. And I'm just worried that Together Housing aren't quite committing as much as they should be towards Calderdale. Is that true, or is that just my perception? Thank you.
Okay, shall I pass to Mark on the Weave Homes point first?
Yeah, absolutely. On the developments in general, of course, Weave Homes was set up with dual aims of increasing the amount of housing in Calderdale, but also bringing a financial return back to the council at the same time. So the sites really have to be viable, which sometimes puts it a little bit at odds with trying to have exemplar design. But you know, we are committed to making the properties as sustainable as we possibly can. The point, just a point of clarity, Councillor Smith, you mentioned that the sites had been sold to Weave Homes. That the cabinet approval was actually agreeing in principle to sell the sites to Weave Homes, so they're still in the ownership of the council at the moment and haven't been sold. They would be sold at the point where there was a suitable business case put forward for the individual site.
Oh, thanks for clarifying that.
Perfect, very much. Is there a social housing element here? Councillor Patient, have you...
No, I just want to thank you, Councillor Robinson. Sorry for jumping in.
No, no.
Just to add to those points about sustainability more broadly, I think in an ideal world we'd be building passive house or similar all across the piece, but there's a balance to be struck here in terms of what is sustainable, and what's sustainable is actually getting houses built so that people can exist, live, work, and boost the economy of Calderdale. So, you know, of course we want those high quality houses, and I think perhaps we're in an interesting opportunity at the moment given what's currently happening at West Yorkshire, and I'd love them to see I'd love to see them making a mandate that we all have a higher, you know, sort of possibility of building those houses as a broad brush. The problem is at the moment in isolation is if any one particular local authority decrees specific high standards, then developers will just look in the neighbouring authority, so it moves that investment elsewhere. I think it sort of typifies the need for a wider look at this, and I think a sensible look at it. So when we think of sustainability, of course, we should be thinking about the quality of the homes, we should be thinking about the suitability of it. But as much as we do need to get on with building those homes, we do have particular issues here in Calderdale in terms of the groundworks and the associated costs with those. That's a real specific one for us here in Calderdale, as typified by a lot of our brownfield sites, and they're questions that we're wrestling with Weave and with the broader partnership all the time. And then not least the topography of the place, and you know, it's a fact with the South Pennines, high steep sided hillsides and everything that comes with that, and the green belt, of course. So we do need to get it right. It's going to be a tough one, but I think this gives us the opportunity to get building, and we clearly have a plan about what's needed. Just to say as well, in terms of Together Housing, I know from the meetings I've had with them that they're committed to delivering the sort of right houses. They certainly have their own climate emergency ambitions built within their own estate, and I think are shortly going to be unveiling the suite of what that looks like and how they plan to properly transition all of their current buildings in terms of retrofit and forthcoming buildings in terms of what they look like. So just a shout for Together Housing and their commitment really to Calderdale.
Yeah, very good. We'll pass on to George now. Welcome, George.
Yeah, no, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, thanks for the chance to to feed a bit back on the commitment to Calderdale. At the moment, and it's in the slide pack, but if you look at slides 13, for example, of the future delivery, we've got 273 properties that we're going to build in Calderdale that we haven't got in the park with yet. That's on top of, at the moment, we're on two major sites in Calderdale. One is Abbey Park, where we're building 83 homes. 63 of those are for rent, affordable rent, 20 are for shared ownership, which is effectively a low-cost owner occupation. And then we've got the flagship scheme at Beach Hill, where we started in January, and we're building 105 new homes for rent in Beach Hill. Now, when you talk about commitment, the amount of investment in Beach Hill is going to be in the region of £22.5 million, of which together are putting in around £15 million of that. In effect, the cost of building those homes is something like £215,000, where they're not actually worth that much. They're worth about 140, 150,000. So what we've done with the partnership, and it's only because we've got the partnership we're able to do this scheme, is we're front loading the costs of that scheme, building the new homes, all for affordable rent. As Councillor Patient has said, we're looking at whatever we can do carbon reduction. Alongside the council, we're working hand in hand on phase 2, which is the Mount Pleasant estate, which is probably the worst named estate in Calderdale because it's very unpleasant. But we're working with the council to refurb 70 homes there. We only own 15, and that's full of carbon reduction strategies. So our commitment to Calderdale is absolutely massive, I can assure you of that. And I think this year, at last, having Abbey Park on site and Beach Hill on site, that's nearly 200 homes we'll be building in the borough. When the local plan gets approved, which hopefully that will happen towards the back end of this year, you'll find that we'll be developing as much as we possibly can with Calderdale in support of your objectives, not in competition with Weave at all, in support of your objectives. And also, Councillor Smith, the sites where we have pulled down poor housing, we aim to build on those sites as well. So Roskin Wood is an example, a horrible old shelter scheme that's been demolished. We will be building on that site in the next year or two, similarly at other sites across the borough. I'm happy to answer any questions, Councillor. I know you're pushed for time.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Councillor Smith, if you've got any questions, can I bring you in at the end? Is that okay to respond? Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 points, so I'll try to be quick. The first one is around, I think there's something in the report, I might have got the expression wrong, but around delivering communities. And I'm just interested around what is the wider work around that, because obviously when you've got houses, you also need things that provide natural contact points. So if that's older people's houses, it might be a community room. If it's where younger people live, you might need a bar. In some parts of North Halifax, you cannot get to the supermarket on public transport. So you can get into Halifax and out of Halifax, but you can't get to your local big supermarket. You can't get to the doctors. There's no shops that have fresh fruit and vegetables, the shops that sell tins and loaves of bread. So there's lots of work that needs to be done around provision that creates community and creates natural contact points that is beyond housing. So I just wanted to understand what the plans are for that. And then my second point is it's really great to see the mill developments, and I'm just wondering if you've got more plans, because the entire of the Upper Valley is full of disused mills, which would make a great housing from Luddenfoot all the way to Todd. So it'd be great to understand that. And then my last question, based on the fact that we definitely need more housing and people like Calder Valley Land Trusts have done, amazing things, are we looking at more opportunities for organisations like Calder Valley Land Trust to be able to take up those opportunities so that we've got more options in the valley?
Right, fantastic. So I think the first two questions, well, they're all quite, I think, about policy. Who would like to respond to Heidi?
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Councillor Kavanagh, for those questions. I absolutely agree with you. Having worked and lived in North Halifax for a number of years, I absolutely understand the challenges of living and working in that area and the importance of community, because there is a very strong sense of community in many parts of our borough, but I can certainly speak for that in North Halifax. And it's essential that when we're looking at housing developments, we look at those wider issues around community. So, for example, with North Halifax, we're doing a piece of master planning work to look at how we can tie together the schemes that we've got, the land that we have, and look at whether we can work together with other partners and with other parts of the council to ensure that what we're doing is enhancing an area. And just as an example, on something like Beach Hill, we have a project board, and for a lot of our schemes we have project boards, and they are not just housing focused. We have colleagues from other parts of the council and other partner agencies. So just as an example, we would have someone like Tom Jones from Highways who would sit on there. Richard Seaman from Planning sits on that project board to ensure that we're looking at those broader issues, thinking about how do we link to the work that's going on in the town centre around road improvements, and trying to link up to Beach Hill to make it about the community, not just about building houses. And you mentioned as well about older people. We have a number of extra care schemes in our borough. One is on site, as you will have seen in the presentation, at Brighouse, Rastrick area. And again, we've done a lot of work with the local community, including GP surgeries, healthcare, talking to our social work colleagues about how we can ensure that that is a real community hub, not just about building flats and apartments for older people. So absolutely echo those comments, and hopefully that is what we do in partnership with other agencies and parts of the council. In terms of mill development, it's often a challenging area, and we do work with developers and those that are interested in wanting to look at how we can do something different with mills, but it can be a challenge when the owners don't want to work with you. But we do continually try and speak to developers and landowners to see if we can get them interested. And I think one really good example of where it has enhanced an area is up at Beach Hill, where there was a very old mill up there that has been refurbished and relet, and has really enhanced everything else that's going on in that area. So something that we do feel passionately about, and I would really strongly encourage any ward councillors, if you're aware of a mill or a developer that wants to talk to us, please do let us know, because we would be really interested. We have got really good relationships with planning, and we can talk through any issues or concerns that they might have. It may be that they just don't know how to start with something, and we have lots of partnerships with other providers where we could maybe link them up and get something, a conversation going to see what we can do. So again, something we would really encourage people to let us know about, and we actively try and get involved in that. And then finally, again, echo what you said about the Community Land Trust. Really important piece of work, bringing forward sites that other developers wouldn't really look at, and really delivering homes for local communities. And one of the things that we've done historically is we got some funding from Homes England to try and work with the Community Land Trust to look at them mentoring other land trusts that might be interested in bringing forward schemes. We've worked with an organisation called Friends of Dorothy, who are based in the Upper Valley, who might want to look at older people's housing for women. And so we've had many conversations with them and have tried to support them with the work that they do. So I think it is quite difficult, but I believe there's some more funding being made available through Homes England. So we would want to support any organisation that were interested in this kind of work, because it is so important and brings forward those sites that other providers wouldn't necessarily look at.
Thanks, Heidi.
Very good. Councillor Smith, Brian Smith.
Thank you, Chair. My question really is what actions are being taken to increase the numbers of houses being built. It's gone up year on year. I mean, it's now estimated that we require 997 per annum. That's up from 2 years ago from 581. And, you know, we have a large number of sites, particularly in North Halifax, that have been looked at so many times and never been built on. And I just think that, you know, the council and its partners are failing the people of Calderdale, because if you look at other areas within West Yorkshire, they're all building far more houses than we ever do. And as I say, it's gone down year on year rather than going up year on year. Thank you.
Interesting question. I will note at this point, Councillor Scullion has put in the chat. I just need to announce it. It's on webcast, but Councillor Scullion has declared a non-pecuniary interest in the Community Land Trust. So just so it's noted. Can we have a response to Councillor Brian Smith? Heidi.
Thank you, Councillor. You're absolutely right, Councillor Smith. It is something that we have seen since around 2007-8, when we were building about 1,000 more homes per annum than we are now. It has had a steady decline. And there are a whole number of reasons for why that is. I think it's been mentioned before, building in Calderdale can be very challenging. We've got flooding issues, we've got steep hills, etc., etc. So finding sites that developers want to build on can be a challenge. I think one of the other challenges has been that not having a local plan in place and having sites readily available for developers to build on has also been a challenge. I've worked very closely with Richard Seaman, who leads on planning, to try and work with developers to talk to them about what else we can do as an authority to encourage them to build in the area. And the response that we often get back is we just don't have the sites that interest them. Our sites tend to be around, you know, certainly less than 100 units, which they are just not interested in. So we've begun to look at other options, such as working with the Community Land Trust, but also we've done a project within my service looking at some of the sites that are in council ownership that are smaller, and working with small to medium businesses to look at developing those sites. So, for example, garage sites, former garage sites, and getting them to a stage where we've got planning permission for them, and then working with the smaller builders who are interested in those smaller sites to get them to build on them. So that's been quite a successful piece of work, but obviously the numbers are relatively small. But, you know, the work that we've been doing with Together Housing through the partnership, the establishment of Weave Homes, are all sort of projects that we're hoping will help us in terms of increasing those delivery numbers. But I think until we have the local plan in place, it is difficult. We are working with our new director in terms of this. I know that this is one of her top key priorities, to look at the housing numbers. And I don't want to put words into Sheila's mouth, but I don't know whether, Sheila, you want to say anything about the work that you've got planned as well.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. Sorry, my connection's unstable, so I'm just trying to keep the camera off as much as possible. Everything Heidi said is correct, and there are lots of challenges and lots of issues, but there's also lots of opportunity. And I think what we're doing at the moment is taking a really fresh look at what can be done in Calderdale. Some of that will be about reuse of existing buildings, repurposing, and Councillor Kavanagh raised mills, and some mills just do not lend themselves to residential use because of the depth of windows and so on, and the floor plates that don't fit for allowing good lighting and so on. So being very critical about which schemes are viable and taking them forward. I think we need to focus our attention on what levers we do have as an authority, and Heidi's touched on lots of them. We have a very strong convening power as a leader in the civic world that we live in, bringing partners together, working with colleagues like Together Housing and other registered providers, inviting developers in, being more developer friendly, being more proactive, speaking to landowners in the way that Heidi's team and colleagues have been, but around addressing barriers. So some of this we will not have the tools to address on our own. So we very much have to change the conversation with government and with the combined authority about what we need to do to remove some of the barriers to bring these sites forward. We have a legacy of underperformance. So the local plan is one tool, but it is the enabling tool. It's a platform that we jump off. We have a historic underdelivery that we need to be tackling as well alongside that. And I think the really bold move around garden suburbs and creating those new communities that have got to be self-sustaining, as we've said, but also connecting to existing employment opportunities and amenity is really key. But those small sites, the majority of sites in Calderdale are very small. Bringing those forward, working, as Heidi said, with some of the smaller organisations, community-led organisations, but looking at infrastructure proactively so that people can come and work with us. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment, and I've brought together a small team involving Heidi's team, planning, assets team, and the major projects team. So trying to get all of that skill and resource really focused on this is a really key issue for us as we move through into the recovery period post lockdown and the restrictions easing. The housing economy has a huge contribution to make, both direct and impact, the employment jobs in construction, the new homes bonus, the council tax benefit, and all the associated benefits that come with having good, sustainable, balanced communities. So it really is one of the top priorities that I think we've got to get right in the coming years. So it's absolutely at the top of my list, and I'll be working hopefully with all of you in months to come with the portfolio holder and with the team, but also, as I said, with the combined authority in Homes England and government, because we really do need everybody on our side to make this work. So I'm happy to take any questions. I know that was a bit of a lecture, and I'm sorry for that, but there's a lot to be done, and there's a lot of opportunity. I wouldn't want anyone to go away thinking it was all bad news.
Well, I think it's an exciting time for you, Sheila. It's a tiny bit difficult, but it's an exciting time for you nonetheless. Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Firstly, I think it's quite positive to hear that from Sheila. It kind of makes us feel like, you know, there is the will and the kind of impetus to move in the right direction, which I think is a good thing. I kind of want to build on Councillor Kavanagh's point about the link between house building and placemaking, because I think that's quite important. And I'm going to speak specifically to the together issue, mainly because I think, you know, there's often, you know, the places that get made slightly less are sometimes the social housing areas, so it is important. And just kind of wondering what you're doing, and if you've got any plans to do stuff in your in the areas where you're kind of developing to build amenities. I mean, Councillor Kavanagh raised specifically supermarkets, but also things that help people save money, because actually one of the responsibilities as social landlords that you have is to make it, you know, possible and easier for people to make sure that they're paying their rent on time. And I mean, I've seen some really good examples of community pantries, so kind of cooperatives where food which can't be sold but is still decent are placed in estates that have food deserts around them. I'm just wondering if you've seen any of the examples. So there's an organisation called My Local Pantry, who, to declare an interest, I used to work tangentially to when I worked on food poverty. And I'm just wondering, have we thought about kind of developing some of those ideas in Calderdale in terms of placemaking alongside development? And if so, it'd be great to hear about that, but also, yeah, just kind of what we're going to do to make sure we get up closer to that target as Sheila's outlined.
Yep. Heidi, there we go. Would you like to direct to the most appropriate person?
I think if I just initially respond and just say that I absolutely agree with everything that has been said by Councillor Fenton Glynn, and I will pass over to George in a moment. I think one of the big opportunities with the garden suburbs is that we can do a lot of this work and look at the issues in the round instead of just talking about housing development. that isn't what we're talking about with those suburbs, and a lot of our other schemes, as well as mentioned with Beach Hill and other schemes, it's about looking at the bigger picture. So that's something that I think we've really learned over the last few years. But I'll pass to George in terms of Together's approach.
Thanks, Heidi. Yeah, so thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, this is something that's absolutely key for us. We have a social value arm called New Ground, which New Ground Together, which I've done some work in Calderdale, especially around working with younger people, trying to get them into training, employment, and so on. But I think with the with Sheila coming on board as your new director, there's a real impetus now for working together with Calderdale on a much broader range of things than just housing, more to do with the communities, more to do with placemaking, getting people into employment and training, and finding ways that they can create sustainable communities. We've done some work, but we've only just kind of got the tip of the iceberg. We've set a meeting up now with the Chief Exec and Sheila, with myself, our Chief Exec and Deputy Chief Exec, for the end of March, where we're going to start talking about it. We're launching a new strategy from April, which placemaking is a key part of it. We're launching a carbon reduction strategy, which is a key part of it. And I think as part of the overall recovery plan that the council's putting together, that you'll be discussing later on the agenda, we want to be a key partner with you to deliver that. What we found from our experiences over the past year is that it's not just about what homes you provide for people, it's about what services you can provide. Now, we are a housing provider, but we need to work hand in hand with the council and other smaller organisations like the Community Land Trust, like voluntary sector, to make sure that we get the best out of all our combined. If we put the synergy together, we'll get more out of it rather than just working on our own, and that's what we must do. So we're committed to that. We want to be a leader alongside Calderdale Council in delivering better communities for people. And just a final point, just a very important point that Councillor Brian Smith raised earlier about, building in North Halifax and how it's taken, we've been left behind. Yes, we have in some ways. So I'm really happy that we're now on building at Abbey Park after a number of years. We're now building at Beach Hill after a number of years. We've got a commitment to build more in North Halifax. We knocked down some really bad flats at Woodbrook and Mixton Road, and we're going to be building there on jointly with the council. We're combining two sites together to create a better site for the people in North Halifax. So we are committed to all of Calderdale, including the areas that maybe be more deprived than some of the other ones. I do think that the local plan is the key to unlocking a lot of the development for the future. But we can't just develop, we must build communities and places that people want to live. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll come in next. Yeah, going on the back of what George said about building communities, I think that's a very interesting point. I think one of the problems which we've got is we need a reset button, quite frankly. The relationship between developers and residents in the community is just completely broken down. There seems to be a lot of mistrust there. Quite frankly, I think people are very skeptical when it comes to housing. They think that it's going to really affect their livelihoods, their views, whatever they cherish. Let's not forget, housing is quite an emotive topic as well. We need a reset button. And a classic example is when it comes to consultations that developers initiate, they come up with this lovely design. It's fantastic, winding roads around the development, trees everywhere. And then when you actually see the outline planning application, it looks nothing like the thing that was originally consulted on. And I think these are all things we need to get our head around. When I look at some of the developments that are put up, or even the applications, there's no excitement. There's absolutely no greenery there. There's no detail of what actually the houses could be like inside. Are smart technologies involved? What kind of charging points are going to be put in there? I just think a lot of the developments are pretty boring, and it's a bit concerning, really, because I think probably once upon a time housing was quite a fun thing. It was it's a way to improve communities. It's a way to almost economic ambition. I think that was one thing that was associated with housing. And it seems like housing isn't viewed in that way anymore. So possibly a way to rectify this, and I would add as well, I could actually recommend quite a few sites within my ward that I'd like to see developed. So all the time, the publicity always comes to, of course, the developments which you don't want to see happen because you think it will affect hip home traffic lights, for example. But I could actually point to a number of sites within my ward that I would like to see developed. So what I think will be quite an interesting piece, if the council create a strategy, which is almost like principles of what a resident can expect or what a resident should be able to see from a development, and let's bring residents in on the journey with us. I think that could be a really exciting piece. It goes far beyond the local plan, because the local plan's about policy, it's about allocation. What's our actual strategy and our principles? How are we actually going to build these communities? You know, rather than putting up 100 houses, where are the community centres? Where are the shops going to be? I think it could be a really exciting piece of work. Could I pass that on for just maybe an initial thought and initial response? Heidi, yeah.
I was going to say, I think Sheila's put her hand up, but if I just initially respond and say that I'm sure if Richard Seaman was here, he'd be absolutely saying, yes, you're spot on. I think from my perspective, for me, we try and have these conversations with the developers that we work with, particular housing associations. And, you know, I'm a real believer that I think you're right. I think there has become a time when people see housing sometimes as a negative thing, when actually it can enhance an area, it can enhance a community. It can be about providing homes for people who live in an area who perhaps don't want to move out of the area, but there just isn't the housing available for them to move into, whether it's first-time buyers, people, you know, wanting to downsize, etc. So absolutely, I think you're right. It's a real opportunity to try and change the mindset of people and seeing housing as a community asset and a real opportunity. But I'll pass over to Sheila because I know she wanted to say something.
Sheila. Thank you, Heidi. Sheila.
Yeah, where to start? Sorry, I was chomping at the bit to get in then. You've touched on lots of things there, Chair, and really valuable things. And just to go back to the quality issue that came up earlier on, government's consulting on the National Planning Policy Framework, and there's a report that's called Building Better, Building Beautiful. Well, it's part of the Building Better, Building Beautiful Commission, Living with Beauty, which is very lofty, but that's all about the design principles, design codes, and that's something that I've been talking to about, and about how locally we have that. Sorry, I've lost you all. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Oh yes, we can do. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So locally, about what we do to interpret that ambition around design quality. So that's something we're looking at the moment. It really helpfully coincides with some work that Public Health are undertaking, leading on around Active Calderdale. And we're looking at how we can bring together planning, communities and public health agendas to make the places that we, existing neighbourhoods and new neighbourhoods, really livable, genuinely livable, where people want to get out and be part of the community, where they have access to green space and so on. So if you ever wanted a reset button, I would suggest that the pandemic is it. And I think we can reframe our ambition. We can talk to people from a completely new standpoint where we are looking at bringing growth in. And I think that point about how we view housing is it is injecting lifeblood into communities that need it, where we need a range of houses, different types, different tenures in communities, so that young people want to make their lives here and they can grow families here, that people are investing in businesses here, can move their families here and know that they will have a good quality of life in the fantastic landscape that we have to offer. So there are lots of things that I think are coming together at the same time that really complement that agenda around just bolstering what we say and how we feel about the housing Calderdale, and not always kind of focusing on the negative. But having said that, we cannot ignore the existing stock and the work that we do to bring empty homes back into use, and the work that we do to improve standards across the private rented sector and more generally is really important, because all of those things become a drag on your economy and on your housing market. So there are lots of different interventions we need to do, and I think the thing that I would stress is that members have a really key role in this, but we also need to tackle it from lots of different directions. So there are no quick overnight wins, but there are things we can start doing quickly to make a difference. And I think that's important, that we can all play that part.
I think that's a lovely way to round off the discussion, Sheila. So yeah, thank you. I think it's an exciting topic, and we've gone over time now, but I can sort of feel a bit of a further item coming along here. Maybe a bit of a scrutiny in a day type item to really get our teeth into it. Like Sheila says, it's a perfect time given the pandemic, and as we come into the recovery phase, I think it could be an exciting thing. So may I pass my thanks on to all officers for attending. Sorry, it's been quite short but sweet, and I'm sure we'll be inviting you back, hopefully if you accept, in very shortly. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, item number 6, highways peer review. So without further ado, we've got Stephen and Andrew, I believe. Stephen
Chair,
and Andrew. Yeah.
I think we might have just lost Stephen, so I think we might just have to give him a couple of minutes to reconnect.
Oh no. Oh no.
I know, just in the time.
I'm thinking, could we kick off anyway?
I think he's rejoined, Chair.
Pardon? Sorry, Kirsty.
I think Stephen's rejoined now.
Right.
Lost him again.
Apologies, Chair. My connection to the centre dropped out rather than local internet. It's a Cisco connection that dropped out then. Anyway, you said at the start if there were no additions to the report to go straight into questions. I'm not aware that there are any additions. My good colleague Mr. Pitts is here from Public Services, and unless Andrew has anything further to add, I suggest we go straight into the questions.
Fantastic. Andrew, any further comments, or are we okay?
No, nothing from me, Chair. That's fine.
Perfect. Thank you. Right, members, questions. Does someone want to fire away to begin with? Councillor Kavanagh?
Hi, that does mean that I get the easy bit, which is there was only one bit of the action plan which was read, which was around staff retention. And so I just wondered what your plans are around that, because it seems like quite a big obstacle that we can't get staff because other areas pay higher salaries, and obviously getting really great staff is really important. So I just wanted to know what our plans are to deal with that issue. And then my other question was just about snow wardens. I mean, I love the concept of snow wardens, and are you considering asking them to dress in a Christmas themed outfit? But really importantly, I mean, I think you're following the flood wardens network, which has been really successful. So, I mean, I think it's a great idea, but if you could just say a bit more about that. Thank you.
Chair, if I leave snow wardens to Andrew and pick up on the retention and recruitment, basically what we're doing, Chair, is we are offering better training opportunities than we have done in the past. We're concentrating our pool more on graduate engineers, albeit not particularly fresh graduate engineers, but graduate engineers with a bit more experience, and we are offering to take them through to full chartered status. We've now attracted 4 really good high caliber graduates, at least one of whom is shortly going to be ready to submit his professional submission for incorporated status, which will then lead on to chartered status. When I was a young engineer, this was part and parcel of climbing the tree, and local authorities have kind of downgraded, if you like, in terms of the qualifications that they expect. We are moving back up, and we are offering that training branch. So, Councillor Cav.
Has anyone else lost Stephen?
I was going to say, I think we've lost him.
Kavanagh's absolutely right. Salaries are an issue.
Sorry, Stephen, we just lost you slightly there. Could you just repeat the last sentence?
Sorry, we're going in and out.
Yeah, can you hear us now, Stephen?
I can, Chair, yeah.
Ah, yes. Sorry, do you want to just repeat the last sentence? I think we only lost you for 2 seconds.
I was just saying, although salaries will always be an issue, we are looking to attract candidates through other means, such as better training opportunities.
Fantastic. Do we have any other questions, members? Right, I'll ask a question at this point then in that case. So yeah, thank you for this. I was just wondering, obviously you've got the RAG analysis on Appendix 3. I'm guessing that's almost like the, well, it's the update, isn't it? It's what's happened since and how you're doing about implementing the recommendations. Who's conducted that RAG analysis and how has it been formulated? Is it Jez's team who have informed it, or what? You know, what's happened here?
The RAG analysis is, as you say, a monitor of where we are with each of the particular interventions. You will see that there are a number of amber ones and a number of green ones. The amber ones are basically those that have suffered a little bit because of the current COVID crisis and the fact that people are a little bit disjointed and working from home. I discussed the RAG analysis with Mark Cole at one of the highway region groups, and that was how we came up with.
It's like that kind of very early 90s mobile phone, isn't it?
This Jez has had the performance.
So I think I might have lost everyone then.
No, I think it's Stephen.
I think, Chair, if I come back in on the phone and try using. Okay, if there are questions for Andrew's side of the house that you'd like to continue with, Chair, I'll come back in on the mobile phone.
Of course, yeah. No, don't worry about it, Steve. We know it's difficult online.
Councillor Lynn's offering to play for time for a bit.
Yeah, but we've got possibly Councillor Kavanagh's Snow Warden's point to follow up on. Is that for Andrew? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll pick that one up, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, I think Councillor Kavanagh indicated that this is about building upon what I think has been a success, the flood wardens. Obviously, that's a piece of work that we've done as an authority in conjunction with the Environment Agency, and Sian Rogers, actually, I notice is on the call, and myself have talked for a number of years about the obvious opportunities to broaden out the responsibility of those people. I mean, that was set up very much following 2015, but I suspect that a lot of the people who are involved in those roles would be more than happy to sort of widen their responsibilities and do more to look after their local environment generally. So it is very much based upon that idea. It's also based upon this concept of working with local people to add value to what we provide as a core service. And I think our winter maintenance service, our gritting service, if you like, in Calderdale, is very good. Nothing can be perfect, but we do get a lot of comments from people from surrounding boroughs that as soon as they get into Calderdale, they find out that the network is far better treated than the areas that they've come from. So we do that, and either Stephen or Jonathan will correct me if I'm wrong, but we grit over 60% of the network in Calderdale, which is quite high compared to many other local authorities. But what we don't have the resources to do, and importantly, what we don't have the local knowledge to do, is deal with some of those sort of out of the way spots that actually see quite a lot of footfall because, I don't know, people use them as shortcuts or whatever. They're a little bit out of the way. And that's precisely what we wanted to do, to use local knowledge about neighbourhoods to add value to that sort of core service that we provide by gritting the highway. Having said all that, you will notice it is amber. And it is one of those, as Stephen's just indicated, where we still need to do some work to get it into some sort of workable scheme. I would like to think that by next winter, we should hopefully have something in place. The last thing I'll just say quickly on that, Chair, and this is not an excuse, but one of the things that has been difficult, and again, Sian has wrestled with this over the years along with me, is that sometimes we encounter a degree of, let's say, risk averseness from some of our colleagues within the council who will tell us, oh, there'll be a big problem if we have people going out with bucketfuls of grit and they're spreading this somewhere and they fall over. We'll have all sorts of liability claims against the council and so on. I personally think that that's not the case, and I think that those sort of things are the challenges that are here for us to deal with, really, because there's a lot of willingness out there to work with us. We've seen that with the flood wardens, and I think we will be daft not to capitalise on that. So I hope, in sort of 6 or 7 months' time, we will have something in place that will help us next winter.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Jenny Lynn, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to say, I'm really pleased that that your scrutiny board is having a look at this, and I think it's good to kind of keep us up to the mark, really. It's quite interesting because the Stephen's teams in regeneration and highways and so on deal with the kind of strategic maintenance of the network and so on, but it's public services and the area I'm responsible for that Andrew runs that actually have to look at a lot of the kind of day-to-day maintenance issues, really. And I think that, my own view is that actually there's a lot of really good work goes on. I think that I certainly, as an ordinary ward member, like everybody else, I think I've perceived an improvement in the response rate and so on, in terms of things like street lights being reported as out, or gullies drains as being reported as blocked, and all the rest of it. But there is an awful lot to do. I think it's in the tens of thousands of drains that we've got to clear, and it's in the I think Jonathan Cole's on the call. He could probably correct me about the numbers of street lights that we've got to kind of look after and everything. So it's a really big area, actually. But I think the other point that we're conscious of, I'm certainly conscious of, and I think Councillor Scullion might want to say something about it from her perspective. I think one of the things I'm conscious of is that we think we can possibly do better in terms of how we respond to whether it's residents or members when they report things in. Because quite often what happens is that people will report, a street light's out and one thing and another. It does get put right, but the question is, how do we make sure that the person that's reported it in knows that? It's a bit like when you put in a complaint to the police and actually the police have done something about it, but you don't necessarily always know. And the police are addressing that in terms of trying to get back to people. And I think we've got to do better at that in the council. But thank you very much for having this item on the agenda, Chair, and I think it's been really a useful discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lynn. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment really on the winter gritting service. Every year, we as councillors do receive quite a few complaints about the winter gritting service. But I must say, this winter, I think I've had the fewest. I think I've only had one complaint all through this winter. So it's a big pat on the back for the winter gritting service. I think they've done a tremendous job. Thank you.
Yeah, I second that indeed as well. Any more comments, members? I think that one of the issues here is that it's a massive thing to digest, isn't it? An absolute massive report, and almost it's this would be quite suitable for a one-item agenda. So, but is there any other comments, members? Or can we, Mr. Cole, Jonathan?
Yeah, good afternoon, good evening, folks. My name is Jonathan. I think a lot of you will have met me before. I'm the new corporate lead for the Green Spaces and Street Scene Service. I just wanted to follow up on the comments about street lighting. Street lighting is the first thing that we've managed to get to a fully working online form. If you now go online to report a street light and add your email address, you'll get an update email when we receive it. You'll get an update email when the contractor receives the job, and you'll get an update email when the contractor's completed the job. That covers about 95% of the occasions. For about 5%, there is another reason why we can't repair the street light. The electric might be off on it, or there might be an access issue. And with those 5%, we'll actually send that person a personal email to advise them the reason why we can't get it back on straight away. And if it's power out, we'll tell you who it's been sent to and how long it's going to be. And if there's an access issue, we'll actually explain that we're going on with that. And actually, I would actually, it's the way I now report any street lights I see out when I go out for a walk or anything like that. And it's actually a really simple way of doing it now, but it's also the fact the feedback loop is working really well. So I would ask you to share that out to people, because it's the start of where we want to go with all our fault finding. And it's been a long time in the process, about 18 months to 2 years, but it's now up and running, and it's worth a go.
I might give it a go myself, to be honest. Well, thank you, Jonathan. That's interesting. Right. If there's not anything else, then I think we'll. Yeah, Stephen.
I was just going to add a couple of things. You've got a report here that represents a point in time. Over the forthcoming year, we're looking at a number of other changes. We've carried out a full survey of all the white lining within the borough, and we're looking to renew that, especially on the A-class roads. We've invested in a few new computer suites, so basically we can carry out automatic inspections from videos as we drive the borough. Though that information can be fed into another suite of computer software, which will allow us to determine the overall road conditions in terms of maintenance and requirements. And what that will also allow us to do is to test various investment strategies, so that we can ensure that everything we do really does squeeze the last penny out of the investment that the council puts into its road network. One of the other things we're looking at is buying a mini planer, and that will allow us to upgrade the repairs that we carry out on Calderdale's roads. There are two types of repairs that we currently carry out. There's what we call the Section 58 defence repairs, which, if you like, are the quick repairs that can get carried out on particular risky defects. And then we've got the planned maintenance, which are the more permanent repairs. By investing in the mini planer, we'll be able to cut down on the proportion of Section 58 temporary repairs we do and replace them with more permanent repairs. So it is a good investment. And those are just some of the things that we are looking at and introducing over the next 12 months, which will make the next review of the peer review report read a lot better.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. That's really helpful. Good to know about the investments as well, and saving other things like time, and also making the repairs better themselves. I think what I'll recommend is that we, in future, we can have a discussion at a later stage of the panel. But if we take one area of essentially this peer review and look into that, I think that could be quite exciting, and probably a good way to drill down on the detail. So if possible, but yeah, thank you for coming, officers and cabinet members, for this item. Really appreciated, and thank you very much. Right, on to the next one. So we have item number 7, the recovery plan. Sean, are you there? Hello.
Good evening, Chair. Nice to see
Welcome. Yeah, good to see you too. Thank you very much. Thank you for doing the report as well. Do you have anything to add, Sean, or no?
I think in the spirit of how everybody else has treated this, I will leave it for people to ask questions. I know there was a huge amount of information in the report and the COVID impact assessment that was circulated with the agenda, and there's an awful lot that you could potentially want to ask questions about. I think I particularly appreciate feedback from panel members on the questions that I set out in the front of the report, which I'm now just going to try and bring up so I can review it. But I think it's really about, are there things that we're missing? Are there kind of aspects that that you think that from the point of view of the recovery plan priorities that you really think that we need to be focusing in on? And more generally, obviously, to kind of note that we are going to be setting up a new economic recovery board, inclusive economic recovery board, and that is going to be one of our kind of priorities in the next, well, as soon as we can really, to make sure that we've got a delivery organisation working with partners like Together, who obviously have already said quite clearly that they really want to work closely with us on this agenda, so to really move that forward. So any sort of, just to kind of note that is our intention, that we're going to set up this new governance structure which will hopefully bring together partners to deliver our plans. The only thing that it doesn't really cover in the report, obviously, because it was written before Monday night, was the announcement on Monday of the roadmap. And we're also going to see more things come out in the coming weeks, which are going to make quite a big difference to how we, the specifics of recovery and what it's going to look like over the next 3, 6, 12 months. So I think that, we will be doing lots of much more, detailed plans with services, and particularly the business and economy team, to really think about how we can support the reopening of the Calderdale economy. And that's not really picked up in this plan at this stage, but just to say that we are really aware of that, and that will be a priority for teams going forward. And apart from that, I thought I'd just see if you've got any questions for myself, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Oh, thank you very much. Members? Councillor Kavanagh.
Sorry, I feel like I always go first, but it's because nobody else does. So my question, Sean, is just, obviously it's really comprehensive what you've got in there, and I'm slightly preempting in terms of our next presentation around economic inequalities. I'm just wondering if you, in terms of the recovery, I'm assuming we've got actions that are kind of immediate. We have to do this really quickly versus what is long term, because I'm conscious of the fact that, say, for example, young people that have, faced a disproportionate impact on COVID, some of the support they need really quickly, don't they? So whether that's, an attainment gap in school or lack of work experience, all of the things we know young people are facing, it needs to be done relatively quickly to have the impact that we need. So my question, I suppose, is around that, and some of it is resources that I think the council doesn't have. So it's kind of plans. What are our plans around advocating for additional resources from government? They've started to talk about catch-up stuff for secondary school students, but actually we probably need catch-up stuff for a lot of different parts of our community. So I suppose it's just, what's your impression around timeline, additional resources that we need, that kind of thing?
Okay, that's quite a big question, but it's a very valid one, and I'll do my best to answer based on what I know. And obviously, just to say, Sheila and I have been working really closely on developing this since Sheila arrived. So some of these discussions she's been very closely involved with, particularly at the regional level, where an awful lot of the funding for recovery, particularly economic recovery, is coming through the regional structures. On timelines, I'll just pick that up first. I think the next, there is some big things that have already been announced, which we are working on, which is particularly coming through the region, like the Kickstarter programme and like other support to get people into employment and skills as early as possible, as they're losing jobs, or they're coming out of furlough and need to be retrained quite quickly or supported into other employment quickly. And that is building on our existing structures, and I think that there's additional money that's going in to support those structures, which is coming through the region, and that is being really developed collaboratively within the region. So all West Yorkshire authorities have got very similar, as you can imagine, things going on in their economies, and we're working together on developing those programs and extending the programs that are working. So, for example, recently we've been putting together a program called Inspire, which is a program of support for people who are far from work, and that's a program which has been led by our business and skills team, but in partnership with a number of services across the council. So people in teams across the council who have got very close links with people who might have got fallen into out of work, or need particular support because of the impact of the pandemic. So the family support team, for example, are involved in that project. The people in Heidi's service who are in the homelessness team who are linked into the Inspire programme. People in my team who are in the inclusive economy team who are working in Park and Worley, and also a number of voluntary sector partners who have been working on employment support for years, and now we're all working together to do that work, which is a really brilliant step forward. And that programme is just getting up and running, but we're already making those connections and identifying people who are losing work through the contacts with the DWP, through the employment hub, and through other schemes. So there's something about ramping that up, but then also bringing on in the immediate sort of 6 to 12 months as part of the employment support work, but then also trying to identify where there might be gaps. And that is stuff that is absolutely going to emerge over the next, we know we're seeing the tip of the iceberg, aren't we, in terms of some of the impact on employment, and with certain sectors still being in furlough, particularly across retail, hospitality, cultural sector. And we know that at the moment that's extended till the end of April. But we don't know yet what might happen post-April, and I think this is a very movable situation, isn't it? So we don't know whether there might be some future announcements which might extend some of that for some sectors. So we're working on the assumption at the moment we probably will need to do some support for those sectors and building support packages for those sectors on a really specific basis. So there's been some work going on at Wicker about identifying how we can put together a sector support programme for culture and tourism specifically. So those are the sorts of things we're doing, but it is very much, identifying what we need locally, what we've already got in place, how do we work as a region to identify money that's coming in regionally, but also identifying gaps beyond that so that we can lobby both as a local authority, but lobby within the region to identify some of those gaps. And that's definitely going to be part of an ongoing agenda, isn't it? If we get more funding coming through to the region through devolution and the other bits of funding which are likely to come, like the Shared Prosperity Fund. So I think there's a lot going on there, but I think to reassure you, there's a kind of definitely an immediate short-term, next 6 to 12 months, what can we do now to respond to the immediate things that we are experiencing? And that will also be opening up the economy at the same time as trying to build that business resilience, and then thinking about the growth beyond that.
It's a really good point about devolution and calling dibs on some of that funding. It's a good point. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really, really good, interesting report. And I really enjoyed the event earlier today. That was excellent examples of how COVID's made it possible to get good outcomes for some of the people most in need, because workers were able to pull together quickly and support them in a really appropriate way. I think, some of the work is absolutely fantastic. It's kind of on a point you've just made about the getting people into jobs. I think we've lost a lot of really bad jobs through COVID. We've lost jobs that we shouldn't have had in the first place, quite 0 contracts. We've lost jobs that aren't really going to be fulfilling and purposeful. And I know that you're you have said that we've only got, you know, that the funding that we're aware of is only up for the next year. But will we be able to, is there a view to sort of developing sort of green jobs in terms of useful jobs, well-paid jobs, and developing that? Because I know we've got the apprenticeship scheme, but for a wider range of people, including possibly women have lost their job in the supermarket or wherever because they've had to do all the childcare. I think I really want to see Calderdale's sort of the standard of jobs be elevated, so our expectations are better for young people, but also for people that have lost out to COVID.
Thank you. That's a really, really good question, and I think there's a few bits in there. We've, in our existing inclusive economy strategy, which this recovery plan will build on, we've got a real commitment already to good work and social value, and I think that will be something that we'll continue to be looking to do. Is we want to support the growth of jobs and sectors which will bring good work, and working with the region, it's part of their priorities as well to do that. So there's a priority at a regional level to develop a thing called a good work charter, working with good employers. So that's something which I think is absolutely key. I think if I was here from the business and economy team, though, I'd also say that there's working with all of our businesses and supporting all of our businesses, and some of that will require some additional support from us to do that, and from the region to do that. So there's an aspiration to do that, but we've got to make sure that we support our whole economy. We had at the event earlier on this afternoon, there was a really interesting conversation that I was involved in about working well, which picked up exactly the points you've raised about the person who came there from Newground, which George Patson mentioned earlier, which is a key partner that we are working with in the Inclusive Economy project in Park and Whalley in the Pelham area. We're talking about the numbers of people who are presenting to them who are on, particularly in the recent months, for employment support, who are on 0-hour contracts and insecure work. And that being something that because they work regionally, that they have recognised as being something that is happening more in Calderdale than elsewhere because of the nature of our employment. And I think that is something that we clearly do need to address as part of the work going forward. So how do we make sure we support jobs which are better jobs than some of the jobs which have been lost? Again, I'm sure probably Councillor Scullion or Sheila might be able to say more about this, but the West Yorkshire Recovery Plan is looking at putting funding into specific growth areas, which we will be part of and we will benefit from. And they are green skills, digital skills, digital growth and green growth. So those are absolutely some of the things that we will be able to make use of. There are other things as well, which are probably, like healthcare. How do we develop the healthcare sector and to make that a better job? Because one of the things that we've seen is that there's obviously a massive reduction in vacancies in retail jobs, but there's vacancies in the healthcare sector in a big way. So there's something about how do we support that sector to grow and become a good employer and an employer of choice with the right skills to support that. So I think there's lots of things in there which we absolutely will be seeing as hopefully as part of our recovery plan, but also drawing on that regional kind of picture as well.
Perfect.
Can I answer all your questions?
I think that's very good. Can I bring Sheila in as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sian's covered a lot of the points I was going to emphasise, but just in response to Councillor Kavanagh, I would say that the nature of this pandemic has meant that we've moved to and from response and recovery actions right the way through the last 12 months pretty much. And don't forget the amount of work that's been undertaken right across the council and through partners as well. And just in terms of the teams that have been represented here tonight, you've had the mammoth exercise around business grants, and it's very easy to criticise when one individual business hasn't got their grant the minute they wanted it. But actually that's been a tremendous amount of work for all of our colleagues who've been involved in administering those and getting that money out safely, because as much as we want to get it out to businesses, it's public money, we have to do it right. I think, the changes to public realm about making our town centres COVID safe, COVID secure, all of those things were done at real great pace. The engagement work that's still happening now with businesses to make sure they're operating in a COVID secure way so that employees are safe, and some of these are the most low paid employees in fast food restaurants, for example, that kind of thing, takeaways, retail, corner shops. and that engagement that's all about educating and informing, so that enforcement is the very last action that we take. So there is lots of work going on in terms of that supporting the economy and supporting people in vulnerable work situations. I think one of the things that we need to really capitalise on, and Sian's touched on it, is around that good work and what good work really means now. And it's probably changed as a result of the pandemic. So some of the things that we now expect and other people will expect is around that flexibility, so that people with caring responsibilities, whether it's children, whether or not it's older relatives that need support, have that flexibility through their employer, because there's a recognition that that well-being is so important, and that productivity of a business is driven by more than just the hours that you sat at your desk or in the building. So I think there's a lot of learning we can all do, and we can learn from each other. So we have a proliferation of micro businesses in the borough. How do we support all of those? We can't have a conversation with all those thousands of businesses individually. So we have to use our networks, and we have to give them opportunities to get together and learn from each other and support each other. Because every micro business, if there's one person and they apply one more, you've doubled the employment just in that business. So there's lots of ways that we need to come at this. And I think one of the ways I like to look at the work that we have to do is about doing our housekeeping. So there are lots of support and services available. So how do we make sure that all of the individuals, the residents in the borough, and how do all the businesses access all of that support and get the maximum take up for Calderdale? So all of the schemes that Sian's referenced at the Combined Authority, one of our priorities has to be about absolutely banging the door down on that and making sure our businesses are getting in there and getting that resource and support. Driving that innovation and growth. Even in the smallest businesses, there are lots of things that they can do, and we've seen that agility of business to switch to digital platforms in very short periods of time and really rethink their business model in a way that they would never have done without a pandemic. And I think we need to really focus, and Sian and I have been wrestling with this for the last few weeks around what the things that are really going to make the difference. And I think we have to focus on the things where we're an outlier. And by that, I mean housing, for example, our performance and housing supply, we are an outlier. We need to do something about that. There are other examples where we need to perform better, but then also there are areas where we excel. And how do we capitalise on that? How do we make sure that distinctiveness, that the tremendous spirit that is associated with all the towns across the borough and the rural landscape and the rural hinterlands that are absolutely key to the identity of Calderdale and what makes it a draw to visitors, to investors, to people that want to live and make their lives here. So I think there are lots of things we need to do, but first and foremost, we've got to make sure we take what's on the table and we ask for what we need to take us to that next level. The budget next week will be key. And, you know, things are already coming out, you know, the stamp duty extension for house sales and so on. The impact of reopening the economy safely, we've got to be very, very cautious. And if Deb were here from public health, she would say, you know, people's lives matter more than the economy at the moment, but they're very, very closely linked. If anything we've learned from this pandemic, it's the importance of health and economy working together, and housing, actually. So I think we've got to do what's right for Calderdale, but we absolutely need to be working towards getting the economy as open as we can in the safest way we can and getting people back into work. And you're absolutely right, picking on, you know, there are sections of the community have been much more adversely impacted, and we have to be making sure we're meeting those needs and providing that safety net. And hearing some of the stories at the anti-poverty workshop this afternoon, you know, people's lives are really challenged, really difficult, and it's easy sometimes to forget that that's playing out in the homes right across the country and across the borough. And so we've got to be making that difference as quickly as we can, but as sustainably as we can, because what we want is long-term change. So we want the economy to grow and evolve. And I think I'll leave it there if that's all right, Chair.
Yeah, fantastic. Councillor Fenton Glynn.
Yes, so kind of looking at the key things to consider in the document. One thing that, and I think, you know, partly being a councillor from Hebden Bridge, this feels quite acute to me, is that 400 million tourist industry that Calderdale has. And it's a really difficult one to think about building back, because actually, you know, if I look at my inbox after a sunny weekend, I've got, you know, at least 3-4 emails complaining that while people were out shopping in the square, they saw people shopping in the square. And, you know, and I do understand that, because when I go through, you know, kind of on my way to the park or whatever, I will see, you know, I will have the same kind of immediate emotional reaction. And it's just trying to work out how are we going to balance the tide coming back in of tourism to a lot of businesses. And, you know, I mean, I speak to my business owners quite regularly and I know how much they need it, but also making sure people feel secure. And I guess kind of built on that, and this is perhaps partly my suggestion or something to consider, is that one thing that I have noticed is people have appreciated what is local to them a bit more. And I think we are seeing, I mean, you know, I get lunch in Hebden Bridge more than I ever have before because I usually work in an office in Spinningfields in Manchester. And, you know, I'm spending part of the 12 quid I'd spend on my train fare on lunch, you know, to support local businesses. But how do we build that? Because I know that other people who are fortunate enough to be in my position are doing that, and make sure people are buying locally to help us build back as well and help sort of stimulate some of those industries in that way. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a broad question, but yeah, that building back safely and also encouraging people to engage in tourism in their local area.
I'll do my best at responding initially, but I'm sure Sheila will want to add to that. I think this is absolutely at the crux of some of the stuff we've got to do. I don't think there's going to be an easy answer to it, if I'm honest. We know that on the one hand, we probably have got pent up demand of people who'll want to do things. They'll want to spend their money. They'll want to go to an event. They'll want to, as soon as things are reopened. And I think we're right at the beginning of trying to identify how we will do that and how we will open up the local economy safely, and particularly from a tourism point of view. I know that Diana Greenwood, our lead for tourism, is just getting some advice from public health about how we might begin to think about that. And I know specifically from a Hebden Bridge point of view, that because I'm involved in the board there, the town board, that they are looking at a recovery plan, which is about how do we open that kind of events and festivals safely. And that is a real concern of the town council as well. And I'm sure it will be of other in other areas as well, you know, Todmorden and other places where people come to visit. I think we've got to we're going to have to plan it really carefully, but I agree with you about the local stays and the local spend, and how do we really maximise that during this summer, because I think most people will be staying locally or holidaying relatively local to their areas this summer. I think that will be quite a big potential opportunity for us, but it has to be a managed one, clearly.
Yeah, is there room for a specific campaign is what I guess I'm thinking. Get people out to the jungle experience in Halifax.
I think just to add to what Sharon said in response to that, councillor, the messaging has to be absolutely hand in hand with the public health messaging, and it has to be directed both at the businesses and the events operators, for example, but at the people that we're attracting and the residents, because it is really difficult. And it is funny how you look, and if you see a film on television and people touch it's quite, you're taken aback. So that emotional reaction is very real. But I think we have to remember that the vaccine, as it's rolling out, and it's already kind of, you know, it's moving at tremendous pace across the United Kingdom, and we're doing really fantastically well in West Yorkshire. But so the role of the vaccine is key, and testing, and that ability to test the lateral flow test, the quick test, rapid testing, so that people can go back safely, knowing that they're, you know, they're not carrying COVID and they're not in an environment where people will be. And also the support for people to self-isolate, and making sure that we maintain that commitment to do that. And I'm not sure how widely it's been shared, but I think the analogy that Deb used around the vaccine and what it means is that it's the equivalent of having a seatbelt. So it's not a shield around you to stop you getting the vaccine, but it reduces the impact, the likelihood of transmission, and the impacts of the virus if you do catch it. So I think there's a lot of messaging to be prepared, and I know Debs is very, very keen that that's very clear, that it's understandable and it's consistent. And we have to work with our partners, as we have done. I mean, we've done a tremendous job throughout the lockdown of being very, very clear about what is acceptable behaviour and how to support each other. Everybody's got lockdown fatigue. People want to get out and about. I've never seen as many people out on the hills in my life. So you know they will want to get back into shops. We know they will want to get back out into our tourism destinations. So it will be a challenge. And I think it's important that we keep that messaging really clear.
Yeah, I guess, sorry for coming back, but I guess one of the conversations we have to have is what's safe to do. because actually we're in this really difficult situation where some people are quite devil may care, and some people are so overcautious that they're not doing things. So, I mean, I try to often have the conversation that actually a lot of the things outside aren't dangerous, but it's not always getting through in the same way. And so I guess part of our messaging also has to include those questions, which is obviously a much more complex conversation to have than, you know, stay in your house and wear a mask, which is slightly easier and more prescriptive.
Yeah, absolutely. And individuals have to make choices and take responsible actions as well, don't they? So, I mean, there's a limit to how much we can control people's behaviours. But I do think that there is, if we can make sure that we maintain that messaging, then we're more likely to get a compliant and acceptable approach to reopening the economy.
Yeah. Councillor Scullion.
I just wanted to come in, really. There are no easy answers in terms of reviving tourism, but it was worth 400 million to the Calderdale economy last year, and clearly a key part of our recovery and a bounce back. I wanted to say that Welcome to Yorkshire have developed a brand of Walkshire, Yorkshire Walkshire. And actually that really plays to us in Calderdale because people do want to walk along the canals and rivers and on the tops. The other thing that we are doing, of course, is increasing our film and TV links offer, not just Gentleman Jack, but all of the other programmes like Ackley Bridge and so on that are made here, so that people can, in due course, visit the sets and the places, including all those people who are going to come from North America to the Gentleman Jack Festival that was just planned just before lockdown. The other thing is that we have worked really hard to try and make sure there are grants for some of the accommodation businesses, excuse me, which really fell between the cracks in terms of grants, because often people are paying domestic rates rather than business rates. So we work really hard to try and make sure we're revising the tourism website. But Councillor Fenton-Glynn's absolutely right. It's got to be a nuanced message. It can't just be everybody come back and pile into the shops and restaurants in the same way as before. And we've worked really hard to try and nuance that message. And I think we will be revising it with public health advice until the last moment of lockdown, actually. But I am absolutely convinced that Calderdale tourism will really, really bounce back sometime this year. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not sure about Walkshire though. It sounds a bit weird. Maybe Walkshire, maybe Walk Rose or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's the accent, Chair.
Walkshire. Okay. Yeah. No. Interesting. I'll ask a question if I may. Yeah. There's a few factors here. I take my hats off to Sian. Wow. It's quite a thing to be undertaking this report, if I'm honest with you. It's quite a task, so hats off to you. I suppose the first question is how do we actually measure success, I suppose, and indeed how long is it going to take for us to actually start measuring the success of it? I suppose that's my first question. Second question is how do we get buy-in, and who do we actually want to get buy-in from? So obviously key stakeholders are the community, our business leaders. How do we get buy-in from them? And my third question is how do we turn a document like this into reality, which is possibly the hardest question. You know, you've got a council which operates a massive organisation, you've got many different facets. How do we actually turn this document and turn it into something tangible? What I would suggest is there's a massive thing in business at the moment called purpose-led, creating purpose-led organisations. And what that's about, it's about essentially everyone who works in the organisation and who makes a decision. Every decision is made in accordance with principles. It's when, it's actually bigger than principles. It's when it's like that shared purpose, isn't it? Everyone knows exactly what you're aiming for. And I suppose if we became a purpose-led council, that could be quite an interesting ideal. And that's when you've got different departments, you've got planning department, you've got highways department, that's when those decisions start to be made aligned with this strategy, if you get what I'm getting at there. Specific points that I'd raise, obviously we've just touched on housing. I think I know that infrastructure's in here. Obviously, I've mentioned a housing strategy, a reset strategy. I think something to do with adding that in there, and really kind of building on residents and developers and those partnerships. I think that could be quite an interesting thing. How do we build the homes that we actually want, homes for the future? That's an interesting concept. Technology, I know that's in here as well, but specifically, how do we actually enable businesses to use technology? How can we advise them what technology is available? We've got some great tech people in the council. Can we actually outsource those tech people to help? Commercialisation, Councillor Scullion, I don't know. Is that a possibility? As well, we've seen technology being used, whether it be online shopping, for example. We've just had our highways team mention about street lights and the new system that's been implemented. I think changing the habits and integrating technology within that habit change is quite an interesting idea, ultimately. Third thing I've noted is energy. I know that's in here as well, but I'd ask you to look at Peterborough Council. They've done some really exciting things when it comes to energy. They've actually created an energy consortium where they've brought together a lot of providers, and they've almost offered residents a package to choose from. I think that is quite an exciting idea. And I also saw something where we all know waste to energy is a massive thing already, but they're actually purchasing their energy back from the providers. That's quite an exciting thing. And they're also looking at geothermal heating as well. The reason why I'm hammering down on the energy point is that I think that's the future, if I'm honest, for the council to invest in these initiatives. For example, there's a lot of, you might know that the grid problems at the moment because the grid's trying to rely on renewable energy, but the supply is peaks and troughs. So in some ways, the council, I think, could look at that. And I know that vehicle to grid technology is a massive thing at the moment. This is what I'm getting at, like how can we actually look to the future, look at the future, what is it going to be, and then formulate the council's position within that. It's a really exciting thing. Final thing, which is last but not the least, that sense of community. I know we've touched on, the report mentions volunteers. It's a bit smaller in comparison to what the overarching things I've mentioned, but using the green spaces, it sounds simple, but it's so important. And what is great is that you might recall in summer, you just go to the park at about 7 p.m. and people were using the parks. They weren't drinking alcohol, they weren't causing chaos, they were just sitting there with families and friends and just having a good time, enjoying their community. And I think that can't go amiss as well. Now, there's a lot to chew at there, so I apologise. But I just think it's a really exciting time to really actually create a council that we want, ultimately, to look at the way things are going and how do we fit in there. So hopefully you might have taken something from that. I don't know.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Chair. I'm just to say I'm absolutely agree with you about how do we measure success and making it something that we get the entire organisation and partners to work with us on as a shared purpose. I think that is the intention with this document. It's going to be difficult because it's trying to be all things to everybody, isn't it? And I think that is always the challenge with these sorts of documents, is how do you grasp everything while still have meaning. And that is, I think, certainly what we're aiming to have is at this stage a strategy which gives us sort of strategic intent, that captures the main things, that gives us a sense of purpose, but that it will then turn into detailed action on the ground with partners, and will be measured and measurable. So we will be identifying success measures as part of the plan, and we will be, we're already in discussion about how do we, you'll probably be aware that we have some KPIs for the council and super KPIs that we measure to see how we're doing, and we're looking at refreshing those to make sure that they're capturing the ones which key measures and that have come out in the COVID impact assessment as being particularly important as things that we want to track as part of recovery. And I'd say some of those we should see sooner rather than later. There are some which are very long term, like the impact on, we talked at the anti-poverty event earlier today about the impact of children losing a year of learning. We're not going to see probably the impact of that for a while. But some things like the impact of unemployment rates, we will be tracking that much more, very regularly, through the recovery, and hopefully we'll be able to see whether or not what we're doing is having an impact on those figures. So I think it will be, absolutely agree with you. The Chief Exec is absolutely owning this document, and I think that will be something that we will make sure that all of our departments are really signed up to. That's definitely the intention. And the other, there's so much in the other points you were making. I think they're all really valid and really useful points. And I'll go away and look at the Peterborough example. I think that sounds really interesting. I know that our green economy team have already done quite a lot of interesting work around energy and looking at different potential opportunities for Calderdale, like district heat and stuff like that before. So, these are things that they have, they potentially will, they're always looking to see whether there's other opportunities which we can explore. I'm just thinking technology, I think that is key. And, there is going to be big investment in infrastructure, digital infrastructure in the coming year and longer. Again, it's coming through the region, and we've got our lead for ICT and digital is involved in those discussions at the region, looking at how do we get better infrastructure, digital infrastructure, but then not just that, but absolutely, as you said, there's existing digital growth programs which we're supporting businesses with to do the kind of transition support, but also supporting those businesses which are really thriving and want to expand in terms of digital as well. So it's both that really low level support for exactly shopping local, which has been amazing, certainly in some of the places that I know, like all the shop local scheme that's been developed across the Calder Valley in lots of different towns has been a really good example that we can support and build on. But also bigger things like there's an organisation business called Digital and Digital who are looking to potentially to expand in Halifax, because they see this as a place where we can grow the digital skills. So yes, I think there's some really useful stuff in there. Again, I don't know if Sheila or Jane want to come in, but really helpful input.
I think you mentioned pick up, Sian, but I was just going to mention the Energy Accelerator at West Yorkshire, which is the only type of programme of its kind in the country that we'll be engaged with and benefiting from. So there is lots of activity around those areas. It is very specialist and it's very difficult to participate in some of that, but I think we need to be in the room on some of those conversations and making sure that we get the benefits here. But I think Sian picked up pretty much everything else that I was going to mention then.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Thank you for the detailed response. It's an exciting time, and I know Robin loves the Vision 2024, but I think we should be putting our eggs in this basket, and I think this document should be forming our next vision or whatever slogan we're going for after 2024. So yeah, Councillor Holdsworth, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a very specific question, really. It was in the news today that the big festivals in Leeds and Reading are going to go ahead this summer. Are there any plans to reopen the Victoria Theatre in the near future?
I'm afraid I can't answer that specifically, and I do know that Sarah Richardson was on the call earlier. I wonder if she's still here. She may know, because obviously that falls within her service. I have seen something promoted about the work they're doing, but I'm not sure specifically. And if we'll find out and let you know.
Yeah, Councillor Lynn.
Yes, the answer to that is yes, we hope so. but it is all very much dependent upon, upon the progress of the roadmap that the government's just announced. But yes, I can assure you, Councillor Horsworth, that there's a lot of work been going on. You'll probably have seen we're trying to kind of like remind people that the Victoria Theatre is there and that it's 120 years old. And so there's been quite a lot of exciting stuff put online and everything about reminding people about the anniversary and about some of the first things that were first. Dainty Dancers, I think, was put on 120 years ago. So there's been quite a lot of sort of quite fun things that people have been talking about, just to try to get it to raise the public profile. And yes, there's a lot of behind the scenes planning. Now, when it's going to happen, when it will be able to open, we don't know, but we certainly hope it won't be too far off. And I can assure you, the team at the Victoria Theatre and Bob Hughes, our cultural lead, are really on the case with that. But thank you for reminding everybody about the Victoria Theatre, because it's very special. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. It's kind of been touched upon in terms of the recovery, and Sean, you did touch upon it yourself with regards to rates of unemployment. Do we have any sort of information at the present as to how much ground we've lost, say, from January last year to January this year, in terms of the unemployment rates and what we're trying to get back to? And the second point is something which again might be of interest, picking up on what George was saying with regard to energy. The timing is quite handy, and Councillor Scullion being here is also fairly useful in that I did write to Councillor Patient fairly recently with a suggestion for with regard to energy electricity would be to use the River Calder to our benefit in terms of building high turbines on the weirs. There's 3 weirs in Brighouse and potential for a 4th further down the river, close by the car auctions. It looks like there's a residual one there of some sort. I was on a walk there recently, just where it where it goes from the navigation back to a canal again. Bearing in mind that we do actually have a small turbine in Hebden Bridge already, whether these are ideas that could be usefully explored to offset our carbon footprint going forward. But yeah, if we can start off with the unemployment, that would be a good place to start, perhaps. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Councillor Dickinson. I'm not sure I can answer if any real expertise about water hydroelectric generation, but I'll certainly, but it looks like Councillor Scullion can, so I'll leave that to her.
Yeah, it would be a piece of work that we explored.
There's some figures which I think are in the impact assessment, which is I know there's a lot of data in there, but broadly what we were looking at was unemployment levels in March 2020 were at 3.6%, and then that rose to 7% in August. So it's doubled. And that is it's mixed across the borough. So there's some good graphs. If you go back and have, I can't sort of quote them directly, but in the COVID impact itself, there's some really good graphs that show the specific changes that have happened in each ward. And I think what you've got is quite an interesting pattern where every single ward has seen a considerable increase in unemployment. So, from the richest to the poorest wards have all seen a considerable increase in unemployment. But what you've seen is the places which were already had quite high levels of employment, they've seen the biggest increases. So I think that's really important to kind of re-emphasize that thing about where is the impact been the most.
Yeah.
So it's been everywhere. Every community has seen the impact of COVID in terms of unemployment as much as it has from a health point of view. But some places, and particularly the poorer places, have had the most. But as an average, we've seen a doubling of unemployment rates. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's interesting. It gives us something fairly concrete to work against, I think, and I think hopefully as things open up again, we shall see those numbers coming back down again, hopefully sooner rather than later, that's for sure.
Very good. I'll go into Councillor Scully then.
Councillor Patient was on the call earlier, but I don't think he's still here. I mean, yes, I don't think I've seen your note to Councillor Patient, but we are very, very interested in the question of alternative sources of energy, and also some things that could be future-proof, like district heating schemes. And we are looking into the question of the hydroelectrics, but I think there are particular problems, and Councillor Patient would have the chapter and verse on this, to do with the nature of the River Calder in particular, in terms of being a fast river that comes up very high, very, very quickly, in terms of what that means for structures. It's not a dependable, slow, steady river that might rise very slowly at certain times of the year. We've had flooding in June, we've had flooding in December, February, etc. But certainly looking at various bits of the River Calder where there have been weirs in the past, and for example, Cromwell Bottom, for example, that there's a bit just near there which is scoured, and you can just imagine a water wheel in there. But there are challenges to do with the flooding, and of course the climate change, the increased rainfall in the borough. We're also looking at air source, which was a new one on me, and ground source questions in terms of looking at energy. I should also, though, add a note of caution. You will know that some authorities have actually come to grief, rather, in terms of their energy companies. So we're very much looking at good practice elsewhere and seeing what we can do that's good value for money for Calderdale, especially as it isn't a city. Some of the infrastructure works that we do are really, really quite difficult. It's, it's digging up our roads again. And it's old Victorian infrastructure that's underneath those roads. So yes, we are exploring, and thank you for the interest in that. Watch the space.
Well, just as a supplement to your comments, air source is going to be almost mandatory for new build from 2025 anyway, with also a hydrogen-ready network to be supplied as well, I believe. But yeah, it's an area of particular interest to me. Yeah.
I think that very good, and it's good that Councillor Dickinson, you're really interested in this, definitely. I think so as Councillor Young has said, our time's up. But what I would note as well, I've just quickly looked at the Energy Accelerator, and I didn't actually know that existed. Quite interesting. And if we as a board could do anything with the team to almost look at possible funding options or something, I think that would be a really good partnership. The Scrutiny board working with the cabinet and officers to see what together we can come up with, because what seems clear to me when we look at devolution and the new situation we're going to be in 5 years' time, when we've got a mayor, actually we're all going to be salespeople, we're all going to be representatives of Calderdale, and we're all going to be knocking on the mayor's door for a bit of money. So I think if we could maybe do something together with this Energy Accelerator Fund, that could be quite interesting. I'm not sure what your plans are, but yeah. And thank you very much. It's been a great report, Sean. Hats off to you again, and everyone else who's been involved. So hopefully it's been helpful. But thank you for that.
No, really, thank you very much for your input and kind of insights. It's really useful. We'll be working on developing the plan, obviously, going forward, and I'm sure there'll be future opportunities for Scrutiny to have a look at that once it's up and running, and hopefully begin to develop some detail. So be really
well. Hopefully we've been good guinea pigs. I don't know, but
thank you.
So yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Okay then, next one. Now then, item number 8, Councillor Kavanagh. I believe you've got a slideshow.
Yeah, and I'm now feeling immensely guilty because Sean has written this ridiculously amazing report, which is completely based on data, and not presented it. And now I am going to present something that's not based on data, but based on human voices. I
warn you, Dave's got a stopwatch.
Dave, just to reassure Dave and anybody else on the call, there's only 11 slides and I'm hoping it will be a minute per slide. It's just the headlines, and the slides are mainly to help my brain. So we obviously, a group of councillors did a detailed review in partnership with the Scrutiny team, and the aim of it really was to look at the economic impact of COVID-19 on 5 specific groups. So they were women, young people, the BAME community, people with disabilities, and those on low incomes or in insecure work. And the reason we picked those 5 groups was based on the fact that lots of national reports were saying, you know, everybody's being impacted, but these 5 groups are facing a disproportionate impact. So we agreed we would talk to people from those 5 groups, but also we really recognise the fact that there will be intersectionality. So there'd be some people that would definitely be facing a range of different issues based on their identity. So in terms of the methodology, it was obviously a cross-party group of councillors working in team with Scrutiny, which worked really well. We did 17 focus groups in total, and we split the focus groups between us, and the focus groups had a range of different things we were asking about, but the kind of primary thing was, what was the impact on education, training and employment opportunities, and also people's financial stability and their plans for the future. We also, when we talked to voluntary community sector organisations, looked at what was their health and stability in terms of how they've been impacting during COVID. We had some telephone conversations with individuals, and we did a survey. Now, we were hoping to get 50 returns on this survey, and we got 354, which was amazing because some of the returns on that survey gave us a bit more information about other groups that we'd not looked at. So we were pretty ecstatic that we got 354 back. And then we also did other meetings with voluntary community sector organisations. So that's kind of how we did it. And what I want to do is just go through the headlines. So I'm not going to go through the detailed recommendations of the report because you've got all of those. So these are the headlines, and I think most of us probably know a lot of this, but COVID-19 has been massively expensive for some groups. So while some people in Calderdale will be saying, well, I've saved money, I've not gone on holiday, I've not eaten out, for some people it's been really expensive because people who are shielding have suddenly had to buy, you know, food in expensive supermarkets. They've had to buy a certain amount of food so that they can get a free delivery. People have had to pay for PPE, more bills in the house. People have not wanted to take public transport, so they've got taxes. So it's just been, for people on a low income, it's actually been pretty devastating because all of a sudden any spare money that they might have had is gone. So somebody said, we're trying to live more frugally, but despite efforts, the fact that I've had to shield and had online deliveries has pushed up even basic shopping bills by approximately £30 a week. So that was something that lots of people in different groups told us. It's just been really expensive. I think this is something that we all really understand. The digital divide has been one of the biggest challenges experienced during COVID-19. But what I wanted to highlight is I think we all understand the fact that low levels of digital literacy, access to equipment and access to data has hit lots of groups. But actually there's been some groups that have been more hit because somebody from the inclusive economy team talked to us about somebody, people in Park Ward who'd lost their jobs, that all of a sudden when the library was closed during lockdown meant that they had no ability to look for work online, to apply for jobs, to access training, to redo their CV. So for some groups, both the shutting of public services like the library plus not having digital access meant they experienced a kind of double disadvantage. And we also saw that with women from a refugee background. You know, one woman said, I've got 2 children, I've got 1 device, which is my phone, I can't afford more data, and actually I don't understand the instructions from school because they're in English. So can you imagine somebody already experiencing the digital divide and trying to help their children with homeschooling, but having absolutely no way of doing that? So just seeing how the digital divide played out with groups that are really particularly vulnerable. Debt advice and relief was key to community support. Now, we know that in Calderdale, we've got millions of amazing people giving out food parcels. We've got food banks, but also mutual aid groups giving out food parcels. But actually what was fed back to us was, when people are coming for food, why are they coming for food? Often they're coming for food because they're servicing debt. So that might be council tax debt, it might be rent, it might be credit card debt. But actually, if often all we're doing is giving out food parcels, but not actually trying to unpick why somebody can't afford to buy food, then we're not creating long-term sustainable solutions for those people. So people were saying to us, we need to give debt advice, we need to give debt relief support, as well as giving food parcels. But we're aware that that's not feasible in some cases. So in Halifax Food Bank, when you've got 153 people waiting, it's absolutely impossible to give debt advice. But it was a big message that came back around how are we enabling people to understand how to live more sustainably, and sometimes relieving that debt. There was something fed back around how are we protecting people's dignity who are experiencing debt, and a really specific example was the council using bailiffs during a pandemic. Now, this is something that somebody personally said, so I can't comment on that as a policy area, but just wanting to think about how are we really considering dignity when people are in such a thing as a pandemic. And then there were things around DWP processes, so people being able to take up to 30% of someone's universal credit to take back a debt, meaning that lots of people were finding it very difficult to live. So we've already talked about this tonight, but the unprecedented impacts on young people, and that was really around, education, things like volunteering and work experience. So, some young people said, I wanted to do work experience, it was all cancelled. They did some digital work experience, it was so competitive, I couldn't get on it. And actually young people were saying, if I've not done this Duke of Edinburgh or this work experience, I've literally got nothing to put on my CV. So young people were really saying, I'm missing out. Apprenticeships and entry-level jobs, particularly in shutdown sectors, just disappearing. Young people that were in work talked about the fact that they don't have any ability to learn from their more experienced colleagues when they're working from home, and they really felt like that was impacting on their ability to progress or get promotions. They talked about general life plans being on hold. I remember one young person saying, I do not want to live with my mum and dad anymore, but no ability to move out. And then some of these issues were just, again, doubly impacted for vulnerable groups. So I remember a woman saying, I've got a 16-year-old, my ESOL classes have finished, he's really struggling in school, we've not really got digital access. And you could see within that family the attainment gap and the intergenerational kind of transmission of poverty on every single level. So just thinking about really vulnerable groups and what's happened to those young people. The gender implications of lockdown. Every single group that we spoke to talked about the fact that women had ended up doing the majority of the homeschooling and childcare during lockdown. Now, this didn't matter what kind of job the woman was doing. Lots of women told us. So we had an artist saying she's lost all her work. Her husband was looking for work, but she had to do the childcare. We had a woman who ran her own business who said, I've given up my business. I've got a child with special educational needs. There's no chance I can run a business and look after my child. There was a woman who said, I've been offered more hours. I can't take the hours, even though I need the money because of homeschooling. Now, gender implications are really complex. We're talking about gender norms in houses. We're talking about undervalue of care work. We're talking about the gender pay gap. They're massive issues. And so when we were thinking about recommendations for this, it was pretty difficult. I mean, I wanted to make a recommendation to Cabinet that they bring down the patriarchy, but I'm not sure that that's a tenable recommendation for Cabinet. So we tried to really think about what could be really practical, and what was fed back to us from a number of people was that even though employers have been amazing and they've really, said to lots of people, particularly women, do you need to work flexibly? And that has led to lots of women getting up at 5 a.m, working from 5 till 9 o'clock to get the work done, then doing the homeschooling, and then working till 10 o'clock at night. So whilst that has been amazing, it was fed back that lots of men felt like they couldn't ask for flexible working, couldn't ask for part-time working. It was still seen as unacceptable for men in the workplace to take care of responsibilities. Now, I'm sure that there's lots of men who have been able to do that, but it just seems a bit of an issue that has led to lots of women losing work, losing money, and also losing potential opportunities for the future. So in terms of disabilities and families of children with special educational needs, there were lots of issues around benefits that I won't go through, but where we need, the main kind of learning point was, during something like a pandemic, we have to have really amazing information and guidance that goes out to vulnerable groups. But I just wanted to focus on the fact that quite a lot of SEND parents just said to us it was almost impossible when the special educational needs schools closed, and they felt like there was almost like people were trying to think about schools and child places as if they needed to be equal. But parents said, you know, I've got a child with really extreme special educational needs and challenging behaviour. It's not the same having them at home as it is having a child at home that doesn't have additional needs. So lots of SEND parents felt like they've been really let down during this period of time by schools, you know, some said by the council, because they felt like they've not really been given any support and respite. This is just, you know, something that we all know. Every single group talks about mental health and social isolation, and also the link between, if you're massively worried about money, how you're going to pay your bills, how your mental health is impacted. And then just finally, the voluntary community sector organisations that we spoke to, the message was, we need long-term investment. There is no point if we keep getting these one-year grants to do small bits of work when it's not sustainable. So lots of them talked about they've had this amazing opportunity to get COVID funding, but actually the funding for their long-term work has not been forthcoming. And so very difficult to do strategic planning, very difficult to think about what they're going to do with their staffing. They've lost a lot of their income generation opportunities, such as renting out of buildings. So this was the biggest message that came from the voluntary community sector, that they need long-term investment. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. And that was it really. So I suppose what we want to do today is to agree the report. We want to agree some revised recommendations, which is mainly just wording, and yeah, so over to anybody else.
We thank you, Councillor Cabinet, and the work you've done in this has been absolutely sterling. It's been unbelievable. You've juggled a lot of commitments alongside this, doing this review work. So I just want to outline how incredible I think you've done, and you've done it all. It seems like it's been water off a duck's back for you. It seems like you've done it really competently and diligently. So I just want to really outline that as well. Could I ask, could we maybe send the recommendations? Can we send them in the chat or something? I think they have been circulated over emails. However, I can't find the updated recommendations.
I think Councillor Robinson, Kirsty's going to share the amended. Kirsty's going to share the amended recommendations. They're not all of the recommendations. They're just the recommendations that we've amended this week.
Yeah,
but we have to share them because they won't have been sent out.
That's perfect for me. That's wonderful. There's nothing on the screen yet.
Yeah, it should be
wonderful.
Taking its time, Chair.
There we go. Fantastic. Right. Now my chat's gone. Let me just have a look. So we've got Mike. Do you want, after members finished, do you have any comments on this at all? I can't see any comments in the chat. So obviously we're looking at the recommendations and we need to approve them as a board. Are there any comments on the recommendations? Oh, what's this? Very good. Everyone's loving the presentation, Roisin, so that's good. Right. There's no comments that have come through. Are we sure, members? I don't know whether it's yes, Councillor Smith.
It was something. I think when you read things, sometimes you don't hear them in the same way. But I think we put in on council should consider its approach and communication around debt management, including, and then we added inappropriate use of bailiffs. But I think we should remove that again, because I think it makes more sense to have consider its approach to the use of bailiffs rather than the inappropriate use of bailiffs, because I think that is what we are actually asking them to do. Sorry about that, because I think that's how it was worded previously.
So you're saying take inappropriate out?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any comments on that amendment, first of all?
I mean, I think that seems fair because there's not that many appropriate uses of bailiffs, I guess, unless, yeah, well, I can't really think of any.
Yeah, very good. So,
can I just say, I mean, I don't know whether Councillor Scullion would want to comment on this, but there was, it might be worth us coming back. I don't know if it's Councillor Lynn or Councillor Scullion, but to talk about the use of bailiffs, because some organisations just felt like it was very inappropriate in the sense of people who were quite vulnerable. So there was one instance where we had a woman who'd just finished chemotherapy and had got behind on her payments and had a bailiff round to the house. Now that's just one anecdotal example, and I'm not suggesting that that was wide, but I think the use of bailiffs might be useful for us to come back to that on a separate date, as quite, to understand it, why we use it, if it's effective. Do local authorities have any other means of doing debt recovery? Okay, it's Councillor Dacre's responsibility, so we could come back to that.
So, but we're taking inappropriate out, aren't we? Yeah. Okay, Councillor Fenton Glynn says, is there anything we can do to amplify the significance of the digital divide? Councillor Kavanagh, I'll direct that to you.
Is there anything significant we can do to amplify the? I mean, I think.
It was just I was just kind of thinking about the things that kind of come across in the presentation that are kind of mentioned in the recommendations. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can, kind of in terms of what we as a council do, as well as kind of our lobbying efforts and stuff.
I think Sean's probably, I think there's a big piece of work going on around the digital divide that Sean probably knows more about than I do, but I know that it's lots of with my work hat on, lots of organisations are, working really hard on this. So for example, in a piece of work I've been involved in Bradford is where we've created community digital champions to support, to get people within the community to be able to support other people in the community to be able to access things digitally, and it's focusing on women from a South Asian background. So I know that there's lots of work going on all over the country right now around how do we effectively address the digital divide. Sean or Jenny, Councillor Lynn will know. I think he's got a hand up.
Yeah, Councillor.
Yes, it was just to say that actually Halifax Opportunities Trust, I know, are doing some really exciting work on that. Actually, some of it is about providing support to women in the South Asian community to get involved as COVID champions anyway, and then to providing devices for them and so on, and also using that as a way to encourage people to access ESOL provision and everything. So, but I think you're absolutely right to emphasise it. I think the other point that I would actually very much support, and I note the recommendation about providing some support, data support for people with for whom English is as a second language, and I think that's really welcome, because I know that St Augustine's Centre have done some really good work trying to secure funding for dongles and to get additional data for people, because it's a really big issue. Oh, and can I just say there was one other thing I wanted to share, if I might just say, and that is the deployment of bailiffs or not is not part of my responsibility. But what I would say, just speaking purely and simply as an ordinary ward member, is that when I've actually had to do casework with where people have had council tax debt, I have found our staff in the council extremely positive. I mean, just to give you an example, I have a chap here who, for some reason, the DWP suddenly decided that they want to change his benefit entitlement going back 4 years. I don't know why, but it meant that he was hundreds and hundreds of pounds in debt with his council tax in a way that he didn't expect to happen. And in fact, the staff in the council were really helpful in terms of working out a payment plan. He's still going to have to pay it, and I think it's ridiculous, but he's still going to have to pay it. But they've got a payment plan which is stretching forward over a few years, and he's going to be able to manage it, and he's quite keen to do it. And because he works as a taxi driver and takes in a lot of funding in cash, etc., they've explained to him how we can pay it in at the post office and pay it in. So I just would like to pay tribute to the fact that I think, personally, I think it's very regrettable if bailiffs have to be used under certain circumstances, but that for many people, I wouldn't want people to go away from this meeting thinking that that's kind of the way that people are dealt with if they get into council tax debt, because in my experience as a ward member, it isn't.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just briefly comment on that? So I would just agree with what Councillor Lynn said. So what I should say is what the feedback that was given actually was the problem is people being scared about approaching the council. So when they approach the council, the approach is definitely what you said, very supportive. Let's work out how we can deal with this. The problems that seem to arise is when people are scared, so they ignore the letters, and then it gets to the point where it's gone too far. So when somebody goes to the council, they said, yeah, very supportive. But for the people who are scared of that letter and ignore that letter, it was that more than when you go to the council, there's a certain approach.
Yeah. Right then. So I've got a comment from Councillor Smith, and then I think we should just move to the vote. So that might as well. So I'll go Councillor Smith, Mike, and then I'll second Councillor Young's proposal to move. Councillor Smith.
I think I've been in a situation where I've worked with lots of vulnerable people who've actually been at that stage where they maybe have had English as a second language and haven't understood the letters that have been coming through the door because they've had so many, and they have had the bailiffs come round and they are quite heavy-handed. And I think we have looked at this as well earlier, so it might just be a matter of, like Roisin said, having a bit more of a look into it. The comment I wanted to make was about the digital provision, because that's one of the recommendations, and I think that is something that we really have to be very, very clear on, and that's the provision of good broadband in any council run facility, for example, the Women's Refuge, and possibly even the hotels, where a lot of the, I know they're not council run, but maybe we could force the Home Office or question the Home Office about their provision of broadband in the hotels, where a lot of asylum seekers are living at the moment. But within the refuge, we spoke to a woman who was, she'd fled domestic abuse. She was in a small flat with her 3 children. One of them had to self-isolate, so she had to take all of them on the school run, and then she had to get back and try and do the homeschooling as well as carry out her work, and they could only access broadband from this sort of corner in the little kitchenette area. And it was just the most stressful situation for somebody who was already undergoing a huge amount of disruption in their lives and at risk of losing their job. So I do think that has to be a priority.
Mike?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to talk about the next steps and just to make sure we've got some of the governance in place. So I think that you've got a recommendation to approve the amended recommendations, which is great. We've got a little bit of design time lined up to make the report look really nice, and so it'd be great if you could agree that in consultation with Councillor Kavanagh, we can make some minor textual amendments, one of which would be to perhaps pick up the point that Councillor Fenns and Glyn made about emphasising the digital divide. We've also written up 3 case studies from people's comments in the questionnaire. My view is that we need to ask their individual permission to publish them, even though they've already given us permission. 1 person has, and 2 we're awaiting for those, so we will include those in the final report. Councillor Robinson constantly reminds us that in his view this is the best of the 4 scrutiny boards. I support all 4 scrutiny boards and they are all equally good. Everywhere I've gone over the last month, I've talked about this bit of work as being exemplary. When I was talking with Councillor Tim Swift about it, he was keen that if this report was approved this evening, it goes to Cabinet in late March, because there's a report on BAME health inequalities on the same agenda, and he thinks it sits nicely with that. When I was talking to Councillor Scullion about this bit of work the other week, and as part of another conversation, she reminded me that not all the recommendations would be relevant for Cabinet. And one of the things that I've talked with the working party about is taking this report to other agencies and around, so to the DWP and other places as well. And we were talking with Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Holdsworth, I think, about that. This bit of work has been really well done by the councillors involved. Councillor Kavanagh, Councillor Holdsworth, Councillor Robinson and Councillor Audrey Smith. So that's fantastic. I am looking for awards for this work to be put in for. The only other thing I needed to mention, sorry, was that I think that the members have been really ably supported by Alex Hunter, this Assistant Scrutiny Officer. Alex is not well at the minute. He'll be back in work tomorrow or Monday, but he would have been here tonight. And I think I'd just like to mention the support that Alex has done, and he's got lots of stuff organised with the 4 councillors. So I'm sorry I took a little bit of time there, Councillor Robinson, but I think if we can get those things in there in the minutes, and Fazana will get all those down, then we can take this bit of work forward.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. And Sian, do you have any comments? Because I know this is something you're interested in. Do you have any comments or to round it off?
I was just going to say, Chair, thank you. I will keep this very short. But I have had meetings already with Councillor Kavanagh about this piece of work as it was being done, and we are really keen to use the insight from this report as part of developing the detail of the recovery plan. It's really valuable. We always said as part of developing the recovery plan that it should be based on not just the data and the evidence from that, but also from the stories that we've heard about the impact of COVID on people's lives. And I think this does that really well. We have also been doing a whole heap of recovery conversations in ward forums in the last few weeks. But this, I think, is a really important kind of sort of adjunct to that. Yeah, there's obviously some really specific things that we can pick up in the recovery plan. So thank you very much, Machine. It's been really fabulous.
That's lovely. Fantastic. Right, I second Councillor Young's proposal to put in the amendments, the recommendations, and then fire them off to Cabinet. So can we have a vote? All those in favour, please? Yeah. All those against? There we go, and the vote is carried. So yeah, once again, thank you to everyone who has been involved in this. Alex, Councillor Kavanagh, Mike, Sian, Cabinet members, everyone. Probably too many people to comment to thank, but thank you so much. So yeah, right, on to the work programme. Mike?
Yes, thank you. This is the second part of this meeting where I'm really missing the fact that Alex Hunter isn't here. We've got 3 items on the work programme for the 25th of March. However, we've also had another petition that has come in about the Mixenden Activity Centre. What I would advise you members is that if you don't hear that next time, then it won't get heard until June. And given that members of the public have taken the trouble to put a petition together, I would suggest you should put that on your next agenda and possibly drop one of the items you have on that agenda.
The Mixenden Activity Centre has been on our has been something that we've spoken about at 3 separate place scrutiny boards. Just just kind of thinking about what we could possibly add to the discussion.
Members can decide. But I think the petition scheme gives members of the public the right to have a discussion at scrutiny about it. Members of the board can decide how full that discussion is or otherwise.
You know, because the decision's been taken, hasn't it? Yeah. But of course, if we have a petition, then I would never turn down the right of someone to have a petition heard. But the question is, if it is to come to the next meeting, then one item needs to leave the next meeting. That's my view. I mean, you know, we speak about unprecedented times, don't we? This has been an unprecedented meeting because we've got through so many items and it's only 8:30. It's fantastic. Yeah, my view would be that an item needs to come off the next meeting if we are to hear that item at the next one. That'd be my view. What members, what do you think? Yeah, Sue.
Yeah, I think we should hear the petition. I feel if we were not to do so, members of the public who have got together to express their views would feel that they were not being treated at all fairly by Calderdale Council and by the Scrutiny Board. So I do think we should hear it, even though I quite agree with Councillor Fenton Glynn that we have spoken about it at length and the decision has been taken. So effectively, there's little we can do. But I think we should hear it.
Yeah, Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a difficult one. Yes, I agree it should be heard, but I think it also needs to be made clear to the petitioners that the decision has been taken. So it does make us little more than a soundboard for that particular part of the occasion, which is almost an exercise in futility. I'm just wondering if there might be a better way around it for them to address their grievance or concerns. It needs to be heard, but ideally in a way that allows something to happen as a consequence, rather than sort of saying, "Well, thank you for that, but the decision has already been taken." You know, it's.
Yeah, Mike.
I'd be quite happy, Chair, if the board was happy to make contact with the lead petitioner and have a discussion with him about, or her, I don't know who it is, with the about the way about the points that have been made, so that we can get, you know, they understand the context, and we and you as a board know what options you have in that discussion. I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah, I think if we can go back to the petitioners and just, I can't put it better than what Councillor Dickinson has said. You know, more than happy to hear the petition. However, unfortunately, we can't do anything because the decision has been taken. Regarding if it does come to the next meeting, we'll have to take off an item, in my opinion, to make it a manageable meeting. The Townsdeal and Future High Streets funding update, is that time sensitive, is it?
I think it's a particularly useful time to hear that one, because quite a lot of the plans have now been worked up.
Councillor Scullion.
Chair, I wonder if I could help. the bids have gone in for Brighouse and Todmorden, reworking Halifax and Elland at the moment, the Sowerby Bridge starting underway. Quite a lot of waiting for civil servants and government departments to come back with an initial response. So actually, if it was to be delayed, it wouldn't be the end of the world, because some of the plans will undoubtedly change when the civil servants say, yes, this is okay, but you need to develop this. So it might be in fact better to wait a little bit, because then we'll have had the results of some of that early challenge, check and challenge sessions from the civil servants.
Of course, of course. Well, if that's in that case, I think it makes sense to move it now then to a future meeting. If that would also be beneficial for cabinet members and also officers, makes sense, doesn't it? Let's move it now. So, is there anything else, members? Councillor Young, I agree. The 3 items on the next agenda are very important. I don't know if that contradicts what I've just said, Councillor Young.
I did put that on before you said that, but after what Councillor Scullion has said, I agree that we can defer the town boards one to the future meeting.
Perfect, wonderful. Councillor Kavanagh and then Councillor Smith.
I was just going to say, I still think, is it still worth somebody having a conversation with the petitioners?
Yeah.
I'm not suggesting we don't hear it, but I don't want their expectations to be raised around what it means.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think Mike's offered to have that conversation. So, yeah, it's only fair, I think, if people come to manage their expectations. Mike?
If everyone's finished on that, there's just one other comment I wanted to make, which is a very quick comment about the work plan, which is that actually we can do some of the work around issues outside formal meetings and perhaps 1 or 2 members taking a lead on some subject matters, and particularly as we go through from April till June, when we have fewer formal meetings because of the elections, that's an opportunity to keep the work of the board going.
Perfect. And then Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really good idea, Mike. I was just going to suggest that we have a look at some of the bit of a review of the housing recommendations that were passed after the last detailed review that Jenny Lynn and Pete Caffrey did. Sorry, Councillor Caffrey.
So is that like a progress update kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I would like to see that.
You've just been nominated for some work, Councillor Caffrey. No,
I got the last 5 words, not the first 2.
Had you tuned out and then heard Peter Caffrey?
Whatever it is, fine, but I didn't know what it was.
I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah.
Just yeah. Okay. Could we add that to the work programme then, Mike? In that case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know we're racking and stacking on the work programme, but why not? So very good. Well, in that case, members, thank you very much for attending. I think it's been a productive meeting, actually. There's been a lot of meat on the bone. I think we need to take it away and think about it and think about what we can do with it. But thank you very much for attending, and thank you to Fazana, Kirsty, cabinet members and officers for attending. And